Ugh, where to begin? My name is Shirley. I'm 75 this year, and I've never done anything spectacular in my life. I've always just wanted to live a quiet, simple life. When I was younger, I was like most American women. I got married, had a kid, and then spent my days taking care of the house and picking up a few odd jobs here and there to help with the bills. I never had big ambitions, you know? I just wanted to raise my daughter, see her grow up happy and healthy, and have someone to lean on when I got old. That was enough for me. And for a long time, that's exactly what I had. I've been retired for years now, living on my meager pension, and some small savings I'd managed to put aside. It was a simple life, a poor one even, but I was content. I have a little 2-bedroom house, and in the yard, I have a few rose bushes that bloom so beautifully in the spring and summer. Every morning, I'd wake up, water the flowers, and then go to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee and some toast. I'd listen to some old country music on the radio. In the afternoons, I'd sit on the sofa and knit, or watch a little TV. Sometimes my old friend Martha would drop by, and we'd sit on the porch and talk about our lives. It was a slow, peaceful existence. I didn't have a lot of money, but I felt secure. I felt like I had handled my life well, that I didn't owe anyone anything, and I had nothing to worry about. But as it turns out, a peaceful life is a lot like a glass cup. It can shatter in an instant. It was a Tuesday, the sun was shining brightly, and I was just about to hang the freshly washed bedsheets out to dry when the phone rang. I picked it up, and it was my only daughter, Lisa. She's in her 40s, a grown woman, but her voice sounded like a scared child's. It was choked with sobs, broken and shaky. "Mom. Mom," she wept, her voice trembling terribly. I have a terminal illness." In that 1 second, my whole world just stopped. The bedsheet in my hand slipped and fell to the ground with a soft thud. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, and I couldn't breathe. Terminal illness? Lisa, what are you talking about? You were just fine. Are you sure they didn't make a mistake? My voice was high-pitched, laced with a kind of panic I'd never heard from myself before. Lisa started crying even harder on the other end of the line. She was speaking incoherently about some rare, late-stage illness, and the doctor says I don't have much time left. Every word was like a knife, twisting in my heart. She told me the doctors said the only hope was some kind of experimental treatment, but it was incredibly, astronomically expensive, a cost she couldn't possibly afford. I was completely stunned. Lisa is the most precious thing in my life. She's my only child, and I've given her all my love. When she was a little girl, even a minor sickness would have me frantic with worry. And now, she had a terminal illness? My daughter, my whole life's hope, she's only in her 40s. Her life was just beginning. She wasn't married, she didn't have kids, she hadn't even had a chance to really enjoy life. How could this be happening to her? Lisa went on to say a bunch of things I didn't understand, some medical jargon about gene therapy, targeted drugs, and immunotherapy. She kept telling me this was her only chance at survival, and if we missed it, there would be no hope left. She said her body was getting weaker by the day. She had no energy. She was throwing up everything she ate, and the pain was so bad she couldn't sleep at night. My head was buzzing, and I couldn't hear anything else. All I could focus on were the words terminal illness, echoing in my ears like a curse. I asked her what hospital she was in and who her doctor was, and if I could come see her. She just stammered, saying she was at a very secret treatment center that didn't allow visitors. She told me she was too weak, and seeing me would only make her sadder. She also said the doctor told her not to tell anyone, to avoid causing more grief, but she just couldn't hold it in anymore and had to call me. After that, she started sending me things. First, a bunch of photos. A few of them were her selfies, from what looked like a dimly lit room. She looked so gaunt, with sunken eyes, a sallow complexion, and her hair looked thin. When I saw those photos, the tears just wouldn't stop. My Lisa, my darling girl. How had she become this way? All I wanted was to be with her, to take all her pain on myself. Besides the photos, she also sent me some diagnosis reports and treatment plans. The documents looked very professional, with a bunch of fancy words I couldn't understand. but they all had a hospital stamp on them saying UCLA Medical Center and a signature from a Dr. Johnson. I thought, UCLA is a famous hospital, so this must be real. The documents listed a long list of medications I couldn't pronounce, as well as costs for examinations, specialist consultations, and experimental drug fees. Each one was more shocking than the last, and the total amount was simply astronomical. Lisa called me every other day, crying as she described how much pain she was in, how she was wasting away to nothing but skin and bones. She sounded so real, so specific, that I had no reason not to believe her. Every time I heard her cry, my heart felt like it was being twisted, and I would have given my own life if it meant she could get better. She was like a flower on the verge of withering, and I, her mother, was watching her fade away, powerless to stop it. That feeling was worse than being terminally ill myself. I've never been rich, but I've always been very frugal. My pension gets deposited into my bank account every month, and it's enough for food and bills, but there's not much left over. The little savings I had were for emergencies. I'd always thought that money might be something I could leave for Lisa after I was gone. But now, with Lisa's life on the line, what good was holding on to that money? I decided I would do whatever it took to save her. I would give everything I had. The first place I went was the bank. That day, I put on my best clothes, like I was going to some important ceremony. When I walked up to the counter, my palms were sweating. I told the teller I wanted to withdraw all my savings and transfer it to my daughter. The young teller looked at me with a bit of surprise and asked, "Are you sure, Miss Shirley? This is all of your savings. Are you sure you want to take it all out at once?" I nodded, my voice a little shaky. "Yes, I'm sure. My daughter is very sick, and she needs the money for treatment. It's a matter of life or death." As I watched the large string of numbers on the screen turn to zero, my heart ached. That was decades of my hard work and sacrifice. But at the same time, I felt a surge of strength. If this money could save my daughter, it was worth it. But my money wasn't nearly enough. The treatment plan Lisa sent me was even more expensive than I had imagined. So, I took a deep breath and decided to go to my old friends and relatives to ask for money. I'd never done anything like this in my life. I've always been a proud woman, and I'd never asked anyone for a handout. But for Lisa, I was willing to give up everything. I went to see my old friend Martha first. I sat in her kitchen and told her about Lisa. Martha listened, and tears started to stream down her face. She hugged me and patted my back, saying, "Shirley, don't be scared. Lisa will get better. We're old friends, and I'll help in any way I can." She immediately gave me a sum of money, saying it was her own savings for retirement, but that Lisa's life was more important. I also went to see my distant cousin and a few old co-workers. Every time I had to ask, I felt my face flush with shame, and I wanted to hide. I had always been a self-sufficient person, and I'd never asked anyone for help before. But for my daughter, I let go of all my pride. I explained to them how rare Lisa's illness was, how complicated the treatment was, and how the doctors said this was her last hope. Everyone was sympathetic and helped me as much as they could. Someone gave me a check, and someone else just put cash in my hand. They knew I was a good person, and they knew I was truly desperate. During those days, I felt like a robot on a schedule. Every morning, the first thing I did was check my bank account to see if any money had been deposited. As soon as it was, I immediately transferred it to Lisa. She was always in a hurry, saying things like, "I need the medicine next week," "The specialist consultation is scheduled," or "We have to pay for the equipment rental." I didn't dare waste a second, afraid it would delay her treatment. Every time I sent the money, I would take a deep breath, feeling like she was one step closer to recovery. My fridge was completely empty. I started eating only the cheapest canned goods and bread. I replaced all the light bulbs in the house with energy-efficient ones and turned off the lights after 7 in the evening, saving every penny I could. In the winter, I turned the heat down to the absolute minimum and wrapped myself in several blankets, shivering with cold. My old friends saw me like this and told me, "Shirley, you need to take care of yourself too. You'll make yourself sick." But how could I worry about myself? Lisa was my everything. If it meant saving her, I would do anything. I gave all my savings and even the money I borrowed from my friends and family to Lisa, every last cent. I told her, "This is everything your mom can do for you. You have to get better. You have to keep fighting." I believed that as long as the money was there, my daughter would live and come back to me. In my heart, I had only one belief. My daughter, my Lisa, would survive. I even planned that once she was better, I would take her on a vacation to the beach, to see the Atlantic Ocean she always wanted to see, to make up for all the suffering she had been through. How was I supposed to know that the money I thought was saving her life was actually going into her gambling accounts and funding her lavish lifestyle? While I thought she was fighting for her life, she was at some fancy casino, using my pension to live a so-called good life. I, her mother, was watching my own future disappear, bit by bit, into a bottomless pit. And I, like an idiot, was still waiting for my daughter's recovery, with open arms. So, as I was saying, I gave all the money I could get my hands on to Lisa. My bank account was empty, and I'd even cleaned out the emergency cash I kept in an old cookie tin. Now all I had was my pitiful monthly pension, and I had to be careful with every dime I spent, even when buying groceries. I even went and pawned the wedding ring I'd worn for decades, the only memento I had of my husband. But back then, all I could think about was Lisa's illness, and I felt that anything was worth it if it meant saving her. But Lisa's calls kept coming every few days. Each time, her voice had that same frail sound that made my heart ache. "Mom, I need a new medicine this time. It's really expensive, but the doctor says it has fewer side effects and works better." Her voice always sounded like she was about to gasp her last breath. "Mom, they're scheduling a special test next week. They say it will precisely locate the cancer cells and find the source of the illness." "Mom, Dr. Johnson recommended a German specialist. The remote consultation fee alone is a few $1,000s, but he says he's the world's leading expert." Each time she asked for money, her reasons were different, but they all sounded so legitimate. One minute it was new medicine, the next it was a test, and the next it was a specialist consultation. When I asked her why there were always new expenses, she would sigh and say, "Mom, with cancer, the treatment plan isn't set in stone. They have to adjust it based on my condition. The doctor says my case is complex, so we have to use the best options or there's no hope." When she said that, even though I had a little bit of doubt, a feeling like this was a bottomless pit of money, there was nothing I could do. After all, I don't know anything about medicine, so all I could do was trust her. I told myself that my daughter was in a race against death, and every penny, every second, was incredibly important. After each call, I had to figure out what to do. All my money had gone to Lisa, and I was so broke that I had to save every cent when I bought groceries. I started rummaging through my house, looking for anything else I could take to the pawn shop. My husband used to collect old stamps and a few old coins. I always thought they were his relics and I should save them, but now for Lisa's life, I gritted my teeth and took them to get some cash. I even started wondering if I could sell some of my old furniture. I had literally turned myself into a person who lived only to raise money. Every day when I woke up, I wasn't thinking about what I would eat, but where I could squeeze out a little more money. I became friends with the grocery store salesperson. She knew I only bought expired, discounted bread and vegetables. I started walking to church instead of taking the bus, just to save $1 or $2 on the fare. At night, the house would be completely dark. I would use a small desk lamp to light up my knitting so I could save electricity. In the winter, I even turned the heat down to the absolute minimum, and wrapped myself in several blankets, shivering with cold. My old friends saw me like this and told me, "Shirley, you need to take care of yourself too. You'll make yourself sick." But how could I worry about myself? Lisa was my everything. If it meant saving her, I would do anything. But as for Lisa, I could never see her. "Lisa, Mom wants to come see you. What hospital are you at? I'll buy a plane ticket and come clean up for you and make you some food." Every time I brought this up, my heart would ache with hope that she would say, "Okay." "Oh Mom, you don't have to do that. I'm in a sterile room right now, and the doctor says my immune system is very weak, so I might get infected." And if you come, you might get a virus or I might catch something from you. It will affect my treatment. She would always say this, with a hint of impatience in her voice, but she would quickly sound frail, as if she really was having trouble breathing. Sometimes I would say, well, what about this? I'll go with you to the hospital to talk to the doctor face to face. That way, I can feel better, and you won't have to face this alone. She would say, Mom, you don't understand. Patients in this kind of experimental treatment have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so family members can't just go and talk to the doctors. And during my treatment, my body is very weak, and a lot of the tests are invasive. I don't want you to see me suffering like that. Just let me accept the treatment by myself. When I'm better, I'll come back and see you, and I'll do anything for you. She always had all sorts of reasons to keep me away. The first 2 times, I could understand, but as time went on, her refusals became more frequent and more forceful. A small seed of doubt began to grow in my heart, but I quickly suppressed it. I told myself that my daughter had a terminal illness, and that she must not want me to see her gaunt, pained face, that she was doing this for my own good. A mother should understand her child. But that uneasy feeling was like a thin fishbone stuck in my throat. I couldn't spit it out, and I couldn't swallow it. I started waking up sometimes in the middle of the night. Lying in my dark room, I would go over everything Lisa had said on the phone, again and again. Sometimes her voice did sound weak, but other times, I would feel like her speaking speed and tone were no different than usual. Sometimes she sounded even more energetic. Last time she told me she was in so much pain that she was writhing in bed and couldn't even drink water, but the next day, when she called me for money, she sounded quite calm and even yawned a few times, as if she had slept very well. I force myself to believe that she's just putting on a brave face, and she doesn't want me to worry. But that fishbone in my throat dug in even deeper. I started to, how should I say it, think crazy thoughts. I don't use social media much, just my tablet to read the news sometimes or video call Martha. But Lisa liked to post photos and stuff on social media. I never really paid attention to it before. I thought it was a young person's thing, and old ladies shouldn't get involved. But now my doubts were growing like weeds, and I thought, maybe she's posting something so I can see what she's up to? If I could just see her, even a single photo, my heart would feel at ease. That afternoon, I couldn't sit still anymore. I took out my tablet and, like an old apprentice, fumbled around until I found Lisa's social media account. I remembered her telling me a few times that she had posted some hospital selfies to document her fight against cancer. I clicked in, and there were a lot of photos, all piled on top of each other. At first, I saw a few selfies she posted. The background was indeed blurry, and Lisa's face looked very thin, bloodless, with dark circles under her eyes, and her hair looked thin. They looked pretty much the same as the gaunt photos she had sent me, maybe even worse. I watched them, and the tears started to flow again. My daughter was really suffering. At that moment I thought, I was wrong. She is indeed very sick. She's lost so much weight. I was filled with regret and felt terrible for doubting her. But as I scrolled down and saw some of her more recent photos, my hands suddenly froze. There was a photo with a magnificent hall in the background, with brilliant lights. It looked like some kind of fancy hotel or resort. Lisa was wearing a beautiful champagne-colored evening gown, a glittering necklace, and a sparkly ring. She looked very expensive. She was standing with a few friends, both men and women, all dressed in fancy clothes with bright smiles on their faces. Lisa also had that same easy, happy smile on her face. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks were full, and she didn't look the least bit sick or tired. She looked even better than the last time I saw her. That glow, that energy. How could this be a sick person? I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, so I rubbed them and looked again. Yes, it was her. How could that woman, smiling so happily, be a person who was terminally ill and fighting for her life? The curve of her mouth, the smile in her eyes, they all showed that she was having a good time and was relaxed. My heart sank, and a cold feeling rushed from my feet to the top of my head. I started to feel dizzy, and my hands and feet went cold. I kept scrolling down, and then I saw it. That photo that was like a needle plunging into my heart. It was a photo of Lisa and her friends on a luxurious cruise ship. There was a blue sky with white clouds, a blue sea with white sand, and a gentle sea breeze. On the deck of the cruise ship, Lisa was wearing a sexy swimsuit and trendy sunglasses, holding a colorful cocktail high in her hand and striking a cool pose. Her skin was a healthy bronze color, her figure was full, even a little bit fatter than before, and her face was beaming with a bright smile. That smile was genuine, without any pretense or pain. Beside her, there was a table full of delicious food, including shrimp, steak, and champagne. In the background, the sea was an impossibly beautiful blue. It was not a hospital at all. I stared at that photo, my mind completely blank. A cruise ship? Luxury items? A huge meal? To pay for her treatment, I had been scrimping and saving. I couldn't even afford the cheapest canned goods, and my old friends had all taken out their hard-earned retirement money to help me. And she was on a cruise ship, enjoying all of this? My stomach started to churn, and I felt like throwing up. My blood ran cold. I remembered her weak excuses of getting infected, not convenient during treatment, and sterile room. I remembered her loud sobs on the phone. I remembered the blurry hospital selfies and gaunt photos she had sent me. Damn her. I had been fooled. A powerful rage, like a volcano, erupted in my heart. The anger was so intense that I could barely stand. It wasn't just anger. It was a flood of betrayal, deception, and heartbreak. I had put everything I had, my life, my future, on the line for her. I had even borrowed money and given up my pride and dignity. And what had she done? She had taken my pension, my life savings, and used it to live a life of luxury. She even faked a terminal illness to deceive her own mother. How could she be so heartless? The tears I was shedding were no longer for Lisa's pain. They were for my own stupidity, for her heartlessness, for my future that had been sucked dry. That kind of gut-wrenching pain was worse than any illness. My daughter, the daughter I had raised so carefully, the one I had given all my love to, how could she do such a thing? How could she be so cruel to a mother who loved her more than life itself? In that moment, my maternal love was no longer blind and soft. It was mixed with intense pain and a clear, fiery rage. My mind, as if it had been slapped hard, was finally clear. I was no longer that old lady who would foolishly wait for news and let Lisa boss her around. I started to go over, word by word, every detail of her illness that Lisa had told me on the phone. She had said her stomach hurt a lot, but in the photos from the cruise ship, her stomach was flat, with no signs of ascites or tumors. She had said she was skin and bones, but in the cruise photos, she was plump and healthy, with even a little bit of extra weight. She had said she was in a sterile room, but the background of those so-called hospital selfies was blurry, and you couldn't tell if it was a hospital at all. In her recent life photos, there were even photos of her running outside in a park. That vitality, that healthy glow. How could that be a sick person? Everything started to become clear, like a series of paintings being revealed, each one laughing at my naivety. Only then did I realize that I had never carefully looked at those so-called diagnosis reports and treatment plans. I had believed them just because they had a famous hospital's stamp on them. My love for my daughter had blinded me, and my fear had clouded my judgment. In that moment, I, Shirley, a 75-year-old woman, decided I would not wait anymore. My daughter had deceived me. She had drained me dry. I couldn't just sit and wait. I had to get justice for myself, for my stolen pension, and for my dignity that she had trampled all over. My heart, which had been so shocked and pained, slowly, found some strength. This strength came from a mother who had been thoroughly infuriated, a strength that was desperate but also full of determination. Lisa, you thought I was a fool, a walking ATM? You just wait. Your mother isn't so easy to fool. I won't let you get away with this. You're going to pay for everything you did to me. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. What could an old lady like me do? But my mind was very clear. The first step was to go to the hospital, find that so-called Dr. Johnson, and expose Lisa's lies. I was no longer the mom who would cry for her. Now I was an old woman who had been deceived and betrayed, and I wanted to get justice for myself, And for all the other old people who might have been hurt by this kind of scam. I had never fought a real battle in my life, but this time, for my pension and for my dignity, I was ready to fight. Lisa, you just wait. The day after I saw those photos Lisa posted on social media, especially that photo of her on the luxurious cruise ship, smiling like a blooming flower, my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. One moment I was crying for her pain, and the next it was like I was doused with a bucket of ice water, cold from head to toe. A deep, bone-chilling rage surged up from the deepest part of me, like gasoline catching fire, instantly boiling in my veins. I'd never hated anyone so much in my life, especially my own daughter. How could she? How could she take my life savings, my pension, and the money I'd begged from my friends and family to live such a luxurious life? And to make things worse, she faked a terminal illness to scam me. I was a blind, stupid old lady who had raised a vicious animal. I was shaking with anger, and I almost dropped the tablet in my hand. The tears wouldn't stop, but this time, they weren't tears of sympathy for Lisa. They were tears of despair and sorrow for being fooled, betrayed, and left with nothing. I kept replaying the scenes in my head. Lisa's smile on the cruise ship, and me hiding in my dark room, shivering under a thin blanket. The contrast was like a knife cutting into my heart over and over again. I told myself, Shirley, you can't just let this go. You can't. Even though I was just an old lady with no education and no connections, I still had a little life left in me, and I had to get justice for myself. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about dignity, a mother's dignity. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My mind was like a movie reel, replaying every single detail related to Lisa. The tone of her voice when she called me for money, her vague excuses, her avoidance when I asked to visit her. All the doubts I had were now illuminated as if by a bright light, laid out clearly in front of me. How could I have been so stupid? Why did I trust her so much? As soon as it was dawn, I got out of bed. My body was still a little weak, since I'd been eating so little and sleeping so poorly for the past few months to save money. But my mind was clear and determined. I picked up the phone, wanting to call Martha, but I stopped myself. This was too embarrassing. How could I tell anyone that my precious daughter had cursed herself with a terminal illness to scam me? I couldn't even say it out loud. No, I had to confirm this myself first. I shakily gathered all the medical documents Lisa had sent me before. The blurry diagnosis reports, the treatment plans, and a few of her so-called hospital selfies. I had looked at them countless times before, but this time, my eyes were like a detective's, and I immediately noticed something was wrong. The stamp on them was a little blurry, like a photocopy of a photocopy. The signature of the so-called Dr. Johnson was a little shaky, as if it had been traced. And that long string of patient numbers, I hadn't even paid attention to it before. I carefully folded all the documents and put them in an old envelope. I also took photos of all of Lisa's luxurious social media photos with my tablet, including the one on the cruise ship. The quality wasn't great, but it was at least proof. These were my only weapons. My neighborhood was a bit far from Los Angeles, so I had to take a few buses and then the subway to get to the UCLA Medical Center. My old bones usually felt tired just walking for 10 minutes. But that day, I was full of energy and didn't feel tired at all. I put on the only decent old coat I had and combed my hair neatly. I couldn't look like a pitiful old woman. I was going to expose a liar, and I was going to get justice for myself. While I was waiting for the bus, my heart was pounding. What if it was all true? What if Lisa was really sick, but she was just taking those fake happy photos because she was too weak or in a bad mood? I started to waver a little. After all, she was my daughter. But then the image of her on the cruise ship flashed in my mind again. Lisa's bright eyes, her plump cheeks, her expensive jewelry. No. It was impossible. A terminally ill person would never have that kind of glow. I had to go. I couldn't let her lead me on anymore. The bus ride felt like centuries. I sat on the bumpy bus, watching the scenery fly by, but my heart felt as heavy as lead. How would I even start? How could I tell the people at the hospital that my daughter was a liar? Would they believe me? Would they think I was just a cranky old woman causing a scene? My heart was beating so fast, and my palms were sweaty. Finally, I got off the subway and following the map, I found the huge building, the UCLA Medical Center. My goodness, this hospital was huge. Tall glass walls, a grand lobby, people coming and going, doctors and nurses in white coats, and family members of patients walking around in a hurry. I felt like a tiny ant, swallowed up in this giant forest of steel. I took a deep breath, gathered all my courage, and walked into the lobby. I found the front desk, where a young receptionist was sitting. I held the envelope in my hand, gripping it tightly, my palms still sweaty. "Hello, I'm here to see Dr. Johnson." My voice was a little shaky, weaker than I had expected. The receptionist looked at me with a little confusion. "Do you have an appointment? Are you a patient of Dr. Johnson?" "No, I'm not a patient. I'm the family member of one of his patients. My daughter. She was diagnosed with a rare, terminal illness by Dr. Johnson, and she's being treated here." I tried to make my voice sound firm, but when the words came out, they sounded so ironic. "Oh, do you know your daughter's name and patient number?" she asked while typing on the keyboard. I quickly told her Lisa's name, and that long patient number she had given me. The receptionist typed on the computer for a while, and then she frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but in our system, there is no record of a patient with that disease. And that patient number doesn't exist." My heart sank, as if someone had hit it with a heavy hammer. I knew it. It was all fake. But I still held on to a tiny bit of hope. Maybe the system hadn't been updated, or maybe it was a confidential case. "No, that's impossible. She sent me the diagnosis reports, and they have this hospital's stamp on them and Dr. Johnson's signature. She has that rare disease and needs that experimental treatment." I took the documents out of the envelope and handed them to her. My voice was a little frantic, even trembling. The receptionist took the documents, glanced at them, and a look of impatience crossed her face. "Ma'am, are you sure these documents are from our hospital? There is a Dr. Johnson here, but..." She hesitated and didn't finish her sentence. "I'm sure. My daughter, Lisa, is being treated here. I gave her all my pension for her treatment." I was so desperate that my voice got louder, and some people around us started to look at me. A security guard in a uniform came over and politely asked me what was wrong. The receptionist quickly explained the situation to him. The security guard looked at me and then at the documents, and his eyes were a little suspicious. "Ma'am, don't worry. How about this? I'll take you to Dr. Johnson's department and you can talk to him in person, okay?" The security guard was very polite. I nodded, grateful to him. I followed the security guard down a long hallway, past several doctors' offices, and finally arrived at a section that said Oncology Department. The security guard took me to a nurse's station, briefly explained the situation to the nurses, and then left. The nurse took my documents, looked at them, and her face slowly changed. She handed the documents to a doctor inside an office, who was Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson was a man in his 50s with gold-rimmed glasses, and he looked very sophisticated. He took the documents, politely nodded at me, and sat down to carefully look at them. First, he looked at the header and the stamp on the report, then at the patient number I had. He slowly started to frown, and his glasses slid down a little, revealing his serious eyes. He picked up a pen, wrote something on a piece of paper, and then looked something up on his computer. Time ticked by, and I felt like my heart was in my throat. The office was quiet, and all I could hear was the sound of Dr. Johnson flipping through papers and typing on his keyboard. I slowed my breathing, afraid I would disturb him. Finally, he put down his pen, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His face had turned very grim, even with a hint of anger. "Miss Shirley, is it?" He looked at me, his voice low, but every word was clear and powerful. I quickly said, "Yes, doctor. These reports, the signatures and stamps on them, are all fake." Dr. Johnson said it directly, with an undeniable certainty in his voice. My mind went bang. Even though I was prepared for this, when this fact was told to me by a professional doctor in such a certain tone, the shock almost made me fall over. "Fake," I repeated subconsciously, my voice a little hoarse with disbelief. Yes, they're fake. First, this patient number is made up. It doesn't exist in our hospital system. Second, I have never diagnosed a patient named Lisa with the rare disease you mentioned. I have never even seen a patient with that name. The signatures are a decent imitation, but if you look closely, the penmanship is completely different from my own. And as for these hospital stamps, they are fake. Dr. Johnson pushed the documents toward me and pointed at the stamps and signatures. Our hospital stamps don't use this kind of ink, and the font spacing and size are slightly different. My hands were trembling as I took the documents. Every word, every mark, seemed to be mocking my foolishness. I had given all my money to this scammer, and I hadn't even carefully looked at these obvious fake details. And, Dr. Johnson continued, his voice filled with suppressed anger, this so-called hospital selfie, your daughter sent you. He picked up the photo I had taken with my tablet, squinted, and looked at it carefully. His eyes suddenly widened, and a look of shock appeared on his face. Then that shock turned into complete rage. The background of this photo, he practically shouted, holding the photo up to my face. Miss Shirley, do you know where this is? I was stunned and shook my head. This is the resting area in our hospital lobby. It's not a hospital room. This chair, this potted plant, this window. I pass by here every day on my way to work. She was never a patient here. She just found a place to take a photo to fool you. Dr. Johnson's face was ashen with anger. He was gripping the photo so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My heart was completely frozen. So even those hospital selfies that had made me so sad were fake. How heartless, how cold, was Lisa to be able to deceive her own mother to this extent? The feeling of being completely played for a fool was worse than being left with nothing. I felt like a clown who had been stripped naked and put on display in the street. This is absolutely outrageous. Dr. Johnson stood up abruptly and started pacing back and forth in his office, muttering to himself. This kind of behavior is a desecration of our medical staff and a public fraud of the healthcare system. She didn't just scam you. She used an illness, she used a doctor to commit a fraud. This seriously damages our hospital's reputation and the credibility of the medical profession. His anger was even more intense than mine. I looked at him, and even though I was in pain, a glimmer of hope rose in my heart. At least he believed me. Dr. Johnson stopped pacing, turned around, and looked at me very seriously. Miss Shirley, I am so sorry for what you have been through. This kind of fraud, especially a daughter against her own mother, is just heinous. Our hospital, as one of the victims, cannot stand by and do nothing. He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a number. Don't worry, I will give you my full assistance. I will immediately write you an official statement proving that these medical documents are forged. This document is a very important piece of evidence for you. In addition, I will personally contact the local police, explain the situation to them, provide the necessary evidence, and demand that they immediately investigate this matter. This heinous scam must be punished by the law. I looked at his angry and determined face, and tears came to my eyes again. But this time, they were tears of relief and hope. I said with a trembling voice, "Thank you. Thank you, doctor. Thank you for being willing to help me." Dr. Johnson shook his head, his voice firm. "You're welcome, Miss Shirley. This is our duty as doctors and as citizens. If this kind of behavior is allowed to happen, it will cause people to lose faith in the entire medical system. And I will also contact the media, especially our local TV station. Cases like this need to be exposed to warn more people and prevent more victims like you from being hurt." When I heard that he was going to contact the media, my heart started to struggle again. Exposure? Wouldn't that mean my family's shame, Lisa's wickedness, would be known to the whole country? I had never been so ashamed in my life. But then I thought about her heartless actions, my empty bank account, and the fact that I, an old woman, had to live off of borrowed money. The hard feeling in my heart came back. Yes. Let her be disgraced. Let her know that taking a mother's pension will have consequences. I watched Dr. Johnson, who had picked up a hospital letterhead from his desk, and was starting to write the official statement. The sun was shining through the window, illuminating his busy silhouette. In that moment, I no longer felt alone. This old lady who had been cheated out of everything, had finally found a real helper. This was not just for me. It was for all the elderly people who could be scammed by their own family. I was going to make Lisa, this ungrateful daughter, pay for everything she had done. My pension will not be wasted for nothing. I left Dr. Johnson's office feeling as if I had just woken up from a long nightmare. In my hand, I held the official statement from the hospital, proving that Lisa's medical documents were all forgeries. That thin piece of paper was more valuable to me than any gold or jewelry. It was the first and most important foundation for my counterattack. From the moment Dr. Johnson revealed the lie, my mind became exceptionally clear and resolute. Grief and anger, like two flames, raged in my chest. But I knew I couldn't give up, I couldn't back down. Lisa, my own daughter, had done such a thing, and I had to make her pay. Dr. Johnson didn't go back on his word. That same afternoon, he called me and told me he had reported the situation to the local police, and had also contacted a few media outlets. He said he believed that such a heinous scam needed to be brought to the public's attention to serve as a warning. My old friend Martha came to see me when she heard I was going to get justice. She was sad for me, but more than that, she was supportive of my decision. A few days later, a young community lawyer named Diana reached out to me. Dr. Johnson had recommended her. She specialized in providing legal aid for the protection of elderly people's rights. Diana's voice was gentle, but she was very professional and firm. She said she had seen the evidence from Dr. Johnson, and was deeply saddened and angered by what had happened to me. She was willing to provide legal assistance for free. Diana's help was a shot of adrenaline. I had never had to deal with lawyers in my life. It was something I only saw on TV. But Diana was very patient. She listened carefully to my entire story, from the first call from Lisa crying about her terminal illness, to me losing everything, and then to me discovering her luxurious lifestyle on social media. I gave her all the evidence I could find. The forged medical documents Lisa had sent me, the bank records of the money I had transferred to her, and the photos I had taken on my tablet of Lisa on the cruise ship and her other extravagant life photos. Diana organized all the evidence meticulously. She told me that the evidence was very strong, and was enough to prove that Lisa was guilty of multiple crimes, including fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. She specifically emphasized the term elder financial abuse, saying it was a very serious crime in the United States because older people are usually more vulnerable and more likely to be targets. Besides Diana, Dr. Johnson also got in touch with a local TV investigative journalist named Mark. Mark was an experienced journalist with a little gray hair and a sharp gaze. He told me he had heard my story and was shocked and heartbroken by it. He said that while family scams happen, it was unheard of for someone to fake a terminal illness to deceive their own mother. It was just an evil thing to do. Mark and his camera crew came to my little house. I had never been in front of a camera in my life, and I was nervous and scared. But when I thought about what Lisa had done, my courage came back. I sat on my old sofa, facing the cold camera, and I tried my best to tell my story of being scammed, word for word. I started from the moment Lisa called me crying about her terminal illness, and I told them how she slowly but surely asked me for money for her treatment. I told them how I gave her everything I had, even borrowing money from friends and family, and the shock and pain I felt when I discovered her extravagant lifestyle on social media. Every word I said felt like a knife twisting in my heart. When I talked about the photo of Lisa's bright smile on the cruise ship, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. I choked up, my voice hoarse, but I kept telling my story. Mark and his team were very professional. They not only interviewed me but also went to Dr. Johnson's hospital to interview him. Dr. Johnson, in front of the camera, rightfully condemned Lisa's fraud. He held up the official statement, emphasizing the severity of forging medical documents and the damage such an act does to the credibility of the healthcare system. He compared Lisa's hospital selfie with the actual scene in the hospital lobby, using facts to expose her lies. The reporters also investigated Lisa's whereabouts and finances. Through various channels, they found her bank card transaction records. The records were like ironclad evidence, and every transaction was like a stab in my eyes. They clearly showed that during the time I thought Lisa was seriously ill, she was frequently visiting high-end restaurants, buying luxury handbags, designer clothes, and expensive jewelry. There were even a few large transfers to some online gambling websites. The total amount of these expenses was almost exactly the same as the treatment money I had transferred to her, and sometimes even more. It turned out that my pension, my life savings, had all been used to satisfy her vanity and gambling addiction. The reporters also used some technical methods to find Lisa's social media posts from different time periods, and compared them to the progress of her illness. For example, when she claimed she was extremely weak and couldn't eat, she had posted photos of herself enjoying a fancy meal at a high-end restaurant. When she claimed she was writhing in bed in pain, she had posted videos of herself partying with friends at a nightclub. The comparisons were a clear and blatant mockery. The TV station produced a special report called The Terminal Lie, A Mother Drained Dry. Before the show aired, I was on edge. I knew that once the show was broadcast, my family's shame would be known to the entire country. But Diana and Mark both told me that this was the only way to make Lisa unable to hide, and to truly protect more elderly people like me. In the end, I agreed. The night the show aired, I didn't watch TV. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to handle it. I asked Martha to call me and tell me how the show was. On the phone, Martha's voice was a little excited and angry. She said, "Shirley, you did the right thing. People like Lisa should be exposed. The show was great. It exposed all her tricks. Dr. Johnson was a great help and tore all her lies to pieces." The next morning, my phone started ringing off the hook. My old friends, some distant relatives, and even some old neighbors called me to show their concern and support, and to condemn Lisa. They all said they couldn't believe Lisa would do such a thing, and that it was absolutely heartless. After the show aired, it caused a huge uproar across the country. My story, the story of a 75-year-old mother who was scammed out of her pension by her own daughter, who faked a terminal illness, was like a bomb that had a huge impact on society. Lisa's social media account was dug up by countless netizens. Her hospital selfies and luxurious life photos were screenshot and posted online side by side. The comment sections were quickly flooded with condemnation and insults. This daughter is a monster. Scamming her own mom's pension for fun? She doesn't deserve to be a child. The terminal illness was fake, but the luxurious lifestyle was real. She should be on a cruise to prison. This is just wicked. She used a mother's love as a tool to get money. I support Grandma Shirley. People like her must be punished by the law. The public's anger was more intense than I could have ever imagined. They dug up Lisa's personal information, including where she worked, the bars and coffee shops she frequented, and even photos of her friends. My phone and email also received countless messages of encouragement and support from strangers. They told me that they had also been scammed by family members, and my story gave them the courage to speak up as well. Lisa's friends and colleagues also found out the truth from the show. Soon, Lisa's social circle started to fall apart. Some of her close friends posted statements on social media, saying they were cutting ties with her and were shocked and disgusted by her behavior. Her colleagues also started to avoid her, and some even anonymously revealed that Lisa was a big spender and had a lot of credit card debt. Lisa, who had once seemed like a glamorous office worker, instantly became the poster child for an ungrateful daughter who was hated by the entire country. Her name became synonymous with family fraud, and her photos were reposted on major news websites and social media, accompanied by the harshest criticism. She was like a rat in the street, hated by everyone wherever she went. Even though I didn't see the hate comments myself, I heard about everything from Diana and Martha. In my heart, there was still a hint of a mother's complex feelings, but there was also the feeling of a great revenge. She had pushed me to this point, so she deserved to pay the price. The public's judgment was even harsher and swifter than I had imagined. Lisa, the daughter I was once so proud of, was now a hated scammer. Everything she had enjoyed, all her good times, were completely torn apart. I knew this was just the beginning. The real legal trial was yet to come. But at least I had exposed her lies and her evil deeds for all to see. Even if I couldn't get my pension back, I was going to ruin her reputation and make her infamous. On the third day after the TV show aired, I was at home with Martha, drinking tea in the kitchen. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Martha looked at me cautiously, and then went to open the door. Outside were a few police officers in uniform and a few in plain clothes. They politely showed us their IDs. The lead officer asked, "Is this Miss Shirley's home?" I nodded, my heart beating a little faster. I knew what was coming. The officer told me they had officially issued an arrest warrant for Lisa on charges of fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. He said that with the overwhelming public pressure and sufficient evidence, Lisa had nowhere to run. She had tried to flee California but was stopped at the airport. The officer also said that when Lisa was arrested, she was in a very bad state and was crying the whole time, but she didn't resist. When I heard that Lisa had been arrested, my heart was full of mixed emotions. As a mother, I knew she must have been scared and helpless. But as a victim, when I thought about everything she had done to me, the anger and coldness came rushing back. She got what she deserved. Then came the long wait and legal procedures. Diana the lawyer was with me every step of the way, helping me with everything. She told me that Lisa had very little chance of winning the case because the evidence was too solid. A few months later, the case finally went to trial. On the day of the hearing, I put on my most respectable old coat and a dark-colored shirt underneath. My hair was combed neatly, and even though my face was full of wrinkles, my eyes were exceptionally determined. I told myself that I wasn't there to be judged. I was there to testify and get justice. The courtroom was packed with people. Besides the judge, jury, and lawyers, there were also many reporters and spectators. I knew it was all because of the TV show, and my story had spread across the country. I could feel many eyes on me, curious, sympathetic, and even some with anger. When I saw Lisa sitting at the defendant's table, my heart skipped a beat. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, her hair was a little messy, her face was pale, and her eyes were empty. She looked a lot thinner than before, not the glamorous Lisa from the cruise ship. She kept her head down and didn't dare to look at me. When I was called to the witness stand, my hands were still a little shaky. I took the oath and promised to tell the whole truth. Diana the lawyer stood in front of me and guided me with a gentle but clear voice. "Miss Shirley, please tell the court how your daughter, Lisa, asked you for this money." I took a deep breath and started to tell my story. My voice was a little shaky at first, but I tried my best to keep it steady. I started from the first time Lisa called me, crying about her terminal illness. I tried to remember every single detail and every conversation. I told the court how she cried and told me she had a rare late-stage cancer, and how she sent me forged diagnosis reports and treatment plans. She told me she was skinny, she told me she was in pain, she told me she was going to die. My voice choked, and tears started to flow again, without my permission. I believed her, Your Honor. I believed her completely. She's my only daughter, and I love her more than my own life. She was all the hope I had in my life. I gave her everything I had, all my pension. I even went to my old friends and asked for money. I even pawned my wedding ring. I looked up at the jury members, and their faces were filled with shock or sympathy. I also looked at the judge, and his expression was very serious. My tears were falling like a string of pearls. I didn't care about how I looked anymore. I was eating only the cheapest food every day. I didn't dare to turn on the heat in the winter, and I had turned myself into a person who only lived to raise money. My voice was full of tears, but it was also incredibly firm. I thought I was saving my daughter. I thought I was in a race against death. But what was she doing? She was taking my hard-earned money and living a life of luxury on a cruise ship. She was wearing expensive jewelry, wearing beautiful clothes, and eating extravagant meals, while I was at home, in the cold, worrying about her and crying for her. I pointed at the photos of Lisa's extravagant lifestyle that had been presented as evidence. My voice was full of indignation. This is my daughter. This is the life she bought with my pension. She faked a terminal illness, she deceived me, and she drained this old mother of every last cent. My testimony brought the entire courtroom to a complete silence. I could feel many people in the audience quietly sobbing. Lisa, at the defendant's table, had her head even lower, and her shoulders were slightly shaking. Next, Dr. Johnson was called to testify. He was wearing a sharp suit and looked very serious. He explained to the court in detail how the medical documents Lisa had provided were fake. He pointed out that every stamp, every signature, and even the patient numbers were fake. He also showed the court the comparison photos of Lisa's hospital selfie and the actual scene in the hospital lobby, powerfully proving Lisa's deception. His professional testimony was the final straw. Lisa's defense lawyer tried to put up a fight. He claimed that Lisa had a gambling addiction and might have some mental health issues, trying to lessen her guilt. But Diana, the lawyer, immediately countered, pointing out that a gambling addiction was not an excuse to scam one's own mother, and that Lisa's forgery was a carefully planned crime, which showed she had a clear criminal intent. Faced with the solid evidence I and Dr. Johnson provided, Lisa's lawyer looked helpless, and his defense arguments didn't hold up. After the court proceedings were over, the jury only took a short time to reach a verdict. When the judge read the verdict, my heart was in my throat. After careful consideration, the jury has unanimously decided that the defendant, Lisa Miller, is guilty of fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. Boom! A loud ringing sound echoed in my ears. I felt my body sway, and Martha quickly held on to me. Guilty. I won. Justice had finally arrived. The judge then read out Lisa's sentence. He emphasized the heinous nature of Lisa's fraud, especially against her elderly mother, which was a serious violation of family ethics and social morality, causing the victim huge financial and emotional distress. Lisa was sentenced to several years in prison and was ordered to pay back all the money she had scammed from me. Although Diana, the lawyer, told me that Lisa was broke and it would be very difficult to get all the money back, it didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that she was punished, and she paid the price for her actions. Her name was also forever nailed to the pillar of shame, becoming a cautionary tale. When I walked out of the courtroom, the sun was shining on my face. In my heart, there was still a hint of an unspeakable sadness. After all, the person in the defendant's seat was my own daughter. But more than that, I felt a sense of relief and strength I had never felt before. I was no longer the old lady who had been blinded by family love and scammed out of everything. I had stood up, I had fought back, and I had won. This difficult journey for justice, while it caused me great emotional pain, also made me stronger. I started to reevaluate my life and saw that there were many other elderly people like me who were suffering from family scams for various reasons. I wrote a book about my personal experience, and I called it My Pension's Terminal Illness. With the help of Diana, the lawyer, and Mark, the journalist, the book became a huge sensation after it was published. Many people who read my story were deeply moved. I started receiving letters from all over the country from elderly people who wanted to share their stories of being scammed by their children or relatives, and were seeking help. I was no longer an anonymous old lady. I started giving talks all over the country, from small community centers to senior activity centers, and even some universities. I would stand on the stage and tell my story, how I was scammed, and how I stood up, exposed the lies, and got justice. I told them not to blindly trust others, to be more vigilant, and to be brave enough to stand up for their rights. I became a strong advocate for the rights of the elderly. I helped those who were trapped in family scams, teaching them about the power of the law and the support of the community. I told them that even in their old age, they should not let anyone take advantage of them. My money, my pension, might not be fully recovered, but my dignity, my future, and the sense of justice in my heart were all restored. I no longer live in the shadow of being scammed, but I now live a life of fighting for a brighter future for others. Lisa's betrayal almost destroyed me, but it also gave me a new life. I know my husband in heaven would be proud of me. And I, Shirley, a simple old American lady, have finally found my own extraordinary second half of life.